and welcome back to Bookish Theories. In today's video I would like to talk about Tomorrow by Together's Eternally, focusing on a not so little breakdown and analysis of the Oscar-worthy movie that they passed as a music video. Now, knowing how big it works, Eternally is one of those videos that we'll probably talk about for the next 5 years. By the looks of it, this is meant to raise questions more than give answers. But even if there are certain elements that I'm sure will leave us guessing for quite a long time, there are also many details that can help us understand the world building and the direction that the story is taking. So go grab a snack, sit back, and let's start from section 1, where we actually encounter the very first conflict of the story, which is the majority of us not understanding Korean. Now, in the intro, the narration actually tells us that on the night of the end, the world turned into ruins and the boys' night was tainted by darkness as well. As the memories of the intended future gradually consumed them, the boys wander in the maze of nightmares and ask themselves if there are any other options for them to choose. The narration ends by letting us know that the boys are confused, and to be honest, same, but there's no time for confusion because as soon as the narration is over, the dragon appears in the sky, the boy's monstrous side flashes before our eyes, and Subin gets a glimpse of a bloody Yeonjun before actually waking up. At this point, everything seems to be back to normal, right? We see Yeonjun helping Yunin Kai with his fairy of shampoo choreography, Taehyun minding his own business as usual, and Bongyu flexing his iPhone 11 to let us know how they spent the budget originally meant for the subtitles. You see, if the opening scene was a nightmare Subin was having, this scene seems to be set in reality. But if you look closely, there are already the first signs that something sketchy is about to take place, because if in this shot here the window is closed, by the time we cut to Subin and cut back, the window gets opened by an unknown force. This, however, is just the beginning, because right after Subin closes the window and turns to face the room, a white mist appears behind the door only to back away as soon as Subin sees it. This leads him to check the corridor, where we see the elevator door opening and closing by itself and the light buzzing unexpectedly. At this point, everything turns into chaos. As soon as Subin shuts the door, an alarm goes off and a earthquake takes place. And this is important, because a earthquake usually represents an unexpected change for the worst. You see, in this context, the earthquake represents a shift in the narrative. And this shift not only implies a sudden change in the lives of the characters, but also an alteration of the reality that they live in. This idea is also reinforced by the sound of a storm in the background, which is often used as foreshadowing for impending doom. But we know this already because we already seen it in the past. In Nap of a Star, for instance, the same sound is used when we are introduced to the dark figure on the broom, when Yeonjun runs into the forest, and when he is ripping his own off his head. So nothing good ever comes out of the storm, and this time is no different, because the thunder is immediately followed by the clock going backwards and stopping at 9 3/4. Now, if in Harry Potter 9 3/4 is the platform from which Harry leaves for Hogwarts, in this case 9 3/4 can be seen as TXT's Magic Hour, which incidentally is also the title of the boys' first Japanese album. I'm bringing this up because it turns out that the game concept that they had in the Japanese Runaway video is actually an essential part of the story going forward. But for now, let's focus on this Magic Hour, which should be regarded as the moment in time where magic officially enters the lives of the boys in the story. This means that the events that we see in Eternally actually take place before Magic Island, Can't You See Me, Puma, and possibly before Runaway as well. And section 1 actually shows us this because at this point the boys are still together and Subin is having nightmares. This not only implies that the fight hasn't happened yet, but also that they haven't reached the island yet, because in Magic Island, Subin is having nightmares while they're still on the train. What's interesting about that scene is that while Yeonjun mentions the mirror ghost as a rumor that he heard from somebody else, the others actually reply as if this is the first time that they heard about this. Bongyu pretends to be scared, Kai is actually scared, and Taehyun straight up says the ghosts don't exist. So, if the events of Eternally really happened before this point, then how can we explain this? Well, let's break it down. In Tomorrow by Together's music videos, the timeline is intentionally unclear because the events are actually split into different timelines that tend to overlap with each other. Since the trilogy is called the Dream Chapter, we can say that the videos are showing us different chapters of a recurring dream where each time we learn something new. As we'll see in a second, however, in Tomorrow by Together's universe, the dream world is mixed together with reality. So what can be considered a recurring dream may also be seen as a time loop where the boys live out the same scenario over and over again until they manage to fix all the problems that they have. Runaway and Magic Island, for instance, basically portray two parts of the same event. That is them discovering magic, them losing control of the magic, and eventually reaching the island to escape the troubles that they caused. At the end of Runaway, we also get the first hint that they will mess up once again by setting fire to the world. And Magic Island and Can't You See Me show us this, once again, by portraying the same event but in two different timelines. If in Magic Island they set fire to the magic world that they consider their home, in Can't You See Me they set fire to the home that represents that world. But this time this event is also overlapped with them fighting and Subin getting left behind. Now this part of the story is still pending because the pre-sequel showed us that this is not over yet. But in Puma, the song revolves around them unleashing their dangerous side, which is symbolized by both the monsters and the dragon that they transform into. Since their world basically follows the logic of a dream, all these different entities are still versions of them even if they appear separated. So if them fighting brought their inner monsters to the surface, the fire that is linked to this fight awakened the dragon and caused the end of the world. And the opening of Eternally shows us this, except that in this timeline this has not happened yet. You see, Subin here is having a vision of the future that he is mistaking as a nightmare. But much like what the narration tells us, these visions of the future are also memories, and this is because this is a time loop that is repeating over and over again. The problem here is that every time that this loop resets, they actually forget about it. And this is something that they repeat constantly in both the storyline and the songs. You see, our story begins in Nap of a Star, where the boys are children and they make the promise with the star to be together forever. In the lyrics, however, the song tells us that at one point, the memories of childhood start to fade away, so they forget about the promise and the star falls asleep. Flash forward to the present, where the narration on Magic Island actually tells us that even if the boys met again, they still don't know it yet, meaning that they still don't remember the first time that they met. Even if they are looking for the star song, they don't know why they met, what they have to find, and what to remember in the first place. And this is because at this point, the star is still asleep, so the road is too dark for them to remember. This idea is also reinforced by the song itself, because the lyrics not only say that they have to remember the star song, but also that they don't have to forget the night, the place, and most importantly their name, which is something that actually comes up over and over again. At the end of Magic Island, for instance, the narration tells us that at this point the boys are starting to remember. And as they ask themselves whose fault could have been, they hear a voice that says, "Remember my name." Sure enough, this is exactly how Eternally ends as well. That is, with a final message on the mirror that says, "Remember my name." But in both cases they fail to remember, otherwise we wouldn't be here talking about it. You see, without considering the first time they forget as children, in the present storyline they forget in Eternally, they forget in Magic Island, and they even forget in Can't You See Me, where they say that their memories are actually turning into ashes. This means that there are at least 3 timelines where the boys fail to remember what they forgot. But the lyrics of Eternally actually clue us in on where to find the answer, because in their lines, Hyun Kai and Taehyun tell us that the name is wandering on their lips as their heart sinks into the maze of memories. Now, if you watch my video about the concept trailer, then you know that the maze is an essential part of the storyline because it also connects Tomorrow by Together to the multiverse that they share with G-Friend and BTS. If G-Friend are stuck in a labyrinth and BTS move from maze to maze as they grow and meet new challenges, Tomorrow by Together have to navigate the maze of memories in order to find the answer to their problems. Now, this maze was actually already mentioned back in Can't We Just Leave the Monster Alive? But in Maze in the Mirror, it is revealed that this maze is inside of their own reflection, meaning that in this context, the maze is a symbol of their unconscious. This is the part of their identity that hides the most primitive aspects of themselves. So, in the case of Tomorrow by Together, the unconscious hides the dragon and the monsters that eventually come to the surface. This idea is also confirmed in Eternally, but here the maze is defined as a maze of nightmares, and this is important because the fact that these memories are nightmares implies that the magic that brought them together will also be the cause of their nightmares coming to life. Now, this concept is also expressed in the video because as soon as the clock hits the magic hour, we can hear the growling of the dragon and the sound of a train passing by. If the growling represents the awakening of the monsters inside of their unconscious, the train implies that what we are about to see is a journey inside of that part of themselves. But before this journey actually begins, we get the sense that this is neither the first nor the last time that this has happened, because as the light flashes, we also see messages appearing on the mirror, the windows and the door, some of which are written backwards and some of which are written correctly. Now, if the message on the mirror says that they have to find the thing floating in the sky, which presumably is the star, on the window we can find some warnings about what is about to happen next. In this shot here, for instance, you can see the messages "I can't breathe," "I need to get out," and "don't go up the stairs," which presumably are referring to Yeonjun, Bomgyu, and Hyunin-kai. But when it comes to the messages that are written backwards, you can see "what did we do wrong on the door" and "will we end up like this on the window," which means that, much like what I said in my video about the concept trailer, they are the ones trying to contact themselves from another timeline. What's interesting here is that all these messages are actually written in different tenses, meaning that some are in the present, some address them in the past, and some talk about them in the future, which means that in the maze of nightmares, past, present, and future are all mixed together with one another. This is why the boys are confused, and this video has taken me ages to write. So without further ado, let's get to section 2 and see what Subin's nightmare is all about. Now, section 2 is titled The Star Song, and in comparison to the others, this is the only one that officially makes reference to the very beginning of the story. This is possibly the most important part here, because this is the first time where we get a glimpse of the backstory that led them to this point. But Big Hit really wants us to suffer, so instead of showing us the dream clearly, they put Subin in a bubble that distorts everything that we see. Now, by the looks of it, Subin here is remembering a festival of some sorts. We see the sign of an ice cream parlor over here, people walking around, and a band actually leaving the stage as the festival comes to an end. Now, even if the poster is unclear, on the flyer we can actually see that this festival took place on the 4th of March. And this is important because the 4th of March is the date of Tomorrow by Together's debut. Now, if we apply the meaning of this date to the storyline, this is literally the day in which the 5 boys came together under one dream to build a better tomorrow. And this idea is also confirmed by the theme of the festival itself, which is, you guessed it, none other than stars. If you look closely, we can actually see that people are walking around with stars in their hands. And right at the beginning, we also get a glimpse of a lantern in the shape of a star, which, I don't know about you, but sure seems like the thing floating in the sky that the boys are supposed to find. This could imply that what Subin is remembering here is the date and place where the boys met for the first time and that they forgot when they got separated as children. And this idea is also confirmed by the sudden appearance of 2 monster masks that look extremely similar to the ones that we saw back in Nap of a Star. So this is literally the moment in which the boys made a promise with the star and the moment that they have to remember in order to solve their problems in the present. What this scene tells us more than anything else, however, is that even if this is supposed to be a happy memory, in the present this has become a sad dream. And even if we still don't know why that is, it seems like the sadness associated with it may be connected to the relationship between Subin and Hyunin-kai, which appears as a child and seems to be able to see Subin before disappearing in the darkness. Now, at this point, we still don't know what this is all about, but what I can tell you is that the video is putting a lot of attention on the connection that they share. A good example of this are the references to Fairy of Shampoo, because if at the beginning Kai is dancing to that choreography, in section 2 Subin is literally in a bubble, which is something that recalls the life stages of that song. Now, since Fairy of Shampoo is the cover of a song from the 90s, this could be a way of expressing the idea that the past is metaphorically coming back to life in the dream. But if we take a look at the lyrics of the song, the references go even deeper than that, because the lyrics describe the fairy as somebody with long hair who approaches them like morning mist and brings comfort to their sad heart. Now, I don't know about you, but to me it looks like the Fairy of Shampoo is none other than the lady ghost that hugs Subin in his dream. And the fact that Subin and Kai are the only ones who see her in the video makes me think that she will play a very important role in the videos to come. For now, however, we can only guess her identity, because she could be Subin's mom, his sister, one of G's friend, or even the embodiment of the star they made a promise with. But Hyun in Kai's section is actually called Eternity Girl, which makes me think that she has something to do with the original promise that was supposed to be eternal, but that maybe wasn't because something happened to either Subin or Hyun in Kai. Now, since Kai's shirt says lucky on it, my guess is that Subin has some tragic backstory that will probably be revealed a couple of years from now. But whoever this girl actually is, what we can say is that she seems like a very comforting presence, and Subin needs that, because what happens right before makes me think that he and the others are in very big trouble. You see, right before we see Baby Kai and the Eternity Girl, we actually see that as soon as Subin gets out of the bubble, a dice appears out of nowhere and a portal flashes out before disappearing. Now, I'm not sure you realize how important this scene is, but let me tell you, my friends, this is huge, because that specific dice is actually used in Dungeons & Dragons, which is a tabletop RPG where the players create their own characters, make them go on campaigns in a fantasy world created by the Dungeon Master, which is the storyteller of the game, and actually roll dice to decide the outcome of an action. In this case, the dice actually rolled a 3, so the outcome is not very good. But the problem here is that in this scene, it's not Subin who is rolling the dice. The dice just rolls by itself, which implies that in this context, he's not the player, but the character that is being played. This means that what we are seeing here is a game reality where the boys are playing characters in a story that they cannot even control. And this idea was actually foreshadowed back in Runaway, where Bumgyu and Taehyun not only mention forbidden games and the magic hour, but also tell us that when the night is about to end, they have to rewind the clock. This is exactly what happens at the beginning of Eternally, but what's even more interesting about this is that the events that we see in the video were already foreshadowed in the Runaway Japanese video as well. Now, in that case, we see the boys in an arcade and Subin using a cup with 9 3/4 written on it as a coin to play a game. Since this is not a real coin but the cup of what looks like a magic drink, when this happens, the boys are literally transported into the world of the game and they acquire special abilities. And much like what happens in Eternally, the beginning of the game is introduced by a ghost and it's game over when the boys reach the sky. If in Runaway the boys become the protagonists of a video game, however, in Eternally the presence of the dice makes me think that the story is incorporating the elements of D&D. And as it turns out, there are quite a lot of clues that would confirm this to be true. Now, since D&D came out in the 70s and has become a cultural phenomenon ever since, I'm not going in detail about the lore because it's impossible to cover that in one video. But since it's a table RPG, the first thing that somebody would need to play is dice, a rulebook, and an avatar that reflects the attributes of the characters. Now, if in Subin's dream we already saw the dice, in both the opening and Bumgyu scene we also saw a book that seems to be extremely important in the story. So that could very well be the rulebook that hides all the secrets of the game. This means that we have the dice and we have the rulebook, but what about the avatar? Well, if in Eternally the boys are the characters, the video doesn't really need an avatar because we are basically seeing the game from the inside. But in other videos, we actually saw a teddy bear that not only has the same attributes of the monsters that they transform into, but also reflects the wound that Yeonjun has on his hand. This means that if in the storyline the boys are the characters inside of the game, that is, monster boys with different abilities and special powers, the teddy bear is the figurine that represents them in the reality of those who are playing the game. But if this is true and they are the characters, then who is playing the game in the first place? Well, it's also them, but maybe them in another timeline, or even better, them as children. You see, Subin's memory here shows us that at one point the boys really did wear those monster masks and possibly even had a star that fell asleep because, well, maybe it was just a lantern. This is the day where they made the promise, and if Subin's memory shows us the reality of it, Snap of a Star shows us the world that they created with their imagination. The magic island, the dragon, the star, them turning into monsters, these are all parts of a dream that the children are playing out in the game. And can't we just leave the monster alive literally told us this, because in the lyrics they not only mention the dragon, but they say that they're gonna have an adventure in the dungeon, then drop the weapons and jump to the festival. Now this idea is also conveyed in the messages in Eternally, because they literally give directions to the characters while also recognizing these characters as themselves. The fact that they have to find the thing floating in the sky, for instance, may be the quest that the children decided for their characters. While the fact that Beomgyu needs to get out of the room, or the idea that Hyunin Kai shouldn't go up the stairs, or even the phrase "remember my name," these all seem like clues that suggested they're playing the game and giving directions to the characters that they're playing. The problem here is that this game is not going as it should, because not only it seems that they are unable to finish it, but the characters are not really doing what the players are telling them to do, because Beomgyu doesn't get out and Hyunin Kai actually goes up the stairs. So what is happening here? If they are the characters, why aren't they following the directions? Well, they aren't, because as Eternally shows us, Subin brought the dice back to reality, which means that now the game is literally taking place in the real world. This idea is also confirmed once again in the Runaway Japanese video, because right at the end we see the game version of Hyunin Kai coming back in human form and the video itself actually glitching around them. This scene basically implies that even if this story follows the logic of a dream, that is, the logic of a fantasy created to be played out in a game, the consequences of this dream also affect reality, because now the two are actually mixed together. This story is like Jumanji on steroids, basically. And this also explains why things like the book or the bear, which are elements that should not exist inside of the game, are actually found by the characters in the story. The boys here are both the characters and the players of the game, but they don't remember it yet, and until they do, they'll be stuck in this loop forever. Now, since Subin is to blame for all of this, two questions come naturally to mind, which are why did he do that, and most importantly, how did he do that? But don't worry, because I might have the answer for both of them. You see, when it comes to the reason why he did it, the answer might be found once again in Can't We Just Leave the Monster Alive, because in that song, it literally says that he doesn't want to grow up, while Hyunin Kai says to hide in this game forever because if they don't like it, they can just reset it. Once again, this plays very well with the idea that Subin and Kai might have a special connection here. But the song also confirms that Subin wants to be a boy forever. So instead of forgetting like the others, he holds on to the game and actually brings it to life. This is what New Rules is also about, because that song literally says that escalators become slides and they break out of their invisible shackles to remake all the rules. The new rules that they're talking about in the song are the new rules that in this case Subin decided to create the moment he took the dice in reality. In the lyrics, they wish to be let go, they want to be free, and their wish is granted. But as the song anticipated, this freedom comes with a price, because now they will be punished and the world will actually end because of them. Now this actually brings us to the how Subin managed to do this, because even if Runaway tells us that they are the source of the magic, there is something sketchy going on, because right after the dice is rolled, behind him we can see two different colored orbs that look very similar to the eyes of the cat in Yeonjun's scene. Now, truth be told, there is also another white orb over here, so this could very well be a trick of the light. But then I remembered that in Nap of a Star, when the cat attacks Yeonjun, there is also this dude watching from a distance. And guess what? In Subin's scene, there is a guy in a scream mask that seems to be looking at him despite the distortion. Now, since this looks like a festival, it's entirely possible that there are more people wearing costumes that we just didn't see yet. But I checked this scene over and over again, guys, and with the exception of the two baby monsters, all the other people seem to be dressed normally. Which, to me, is extremely suspicious because if we go back and take a look at Nap of a Star, the skeleton guy actually checks all the boxes to be considered a witch or a wizard. Traditionally, evil witches are portrayed riding a broom, wearing a pointy hat, and having a black cat as familiar. And this guy has all three of them, which could imply that the magic that the boys awakened also awakened something darker, which is now messing with the game that the kids seem unable to finish. You see, in the concept trailer, we already saw that the cat may be to blame for Subin's disappearance. So the fact that the orbs in this scene recall the cat and the witch could imply that in this case, they roll the dice that Subin ends up bringing back to reality. If this is the case, this means that when Subin freed the game, he also freed the evil in the game that will cause the end of the world and eventually Yeonjun's death. Which, incidentally, is something that is also foreshadowed in Taehyun's section, where one of the flowers actually turns into a skull. Now, the whole idea of an evil entity that lives on another plane and uses a young boy to enter our world might actually be familiar to some of you because this is literally the plot of Stranger Things, which, as it turns out, has many similarities with our story. You see, if in the storyline Subin disappears as nightmares that turn out to be real, the dream is a missed reality in the mirror and the kids actually play a game that is connected to the plot, in Stranger Things, Will disappears as visions of the other world that are also real, the Upside Down is described as a dark reflection of our world, and the kids play D&D and apply the rules of the game to reality. Now, this may seem like a chain of coincidences to some of you, but in the Japanese Runaway, the arcade scene with the sky turning red is a very close reference to the second season of the show. And in case you're not convinced yet, in one of the Can't You See Me stages, we literally see the wall of Christmas lights that Will's mom uses to communicate with the boy in the Upside Down. If I'm correct about this could mean that much like the kids in Stranger Things, the boys are playing specific roles that can help us understand the story a little better. And once again, the Japanese Runaway has been foreshadowing this, especially when it comes to Yeonjun, Hyunin-kai, and Subin. Now, in that video, we see that the three of them are at very different levels of the game, because in the scene of the maze, Yeonjun is level normal, Kai is level hard, and Subin is level crazy, all of which perfectly reflects their abilities in Eternally. Yeonjun, for instance, is absolutely terrible at this, and both videos confirm this idea because if in Runaway he struggles to cross the maze, in Eternally he keeps dying over and over again. Now, if this was a normal game, this wouldn't be much of a problem, but in this case it is, because the maze that Yeonjun is crossing here is a maze of nightmares that shows the memories of the intended future. So even if the game resets multiple times, one thing that never changes is that in the future Yeonjun will die. If in Eternally he sees himself dead in the rubble, is possibly killed again by the cat, and is dead once again in Taehyun's section, in Magic Island he dies yet again together with the others, and this is because, according to the narration, at this time he thought that this was salvation. This means that his mistake is to trust the cat over and over again. And as it turns out, this idea might actually tell us something about the reason why Yeonjun is the guilty one in Can't You See Me. Now, if we assume that the cat is the witch's familiar who is tricking Yeonjun by looking harmless, this means that Yeonjun might set fire to the world because he trusted the devil side of himself. He got influenced by the dark side and the dark side took over, resulting in his death and possibly the death of everybody else. But Nap of a Star actually shows us a solution to this because in this timeline, Yeonjun manages to run away and finally reunites with the others. Now in this context, Napova's star is quite important because this is the only timeline we've seen so far where everybody survives and the boys can reunite with the star. You see, in comparison to what we saw in Eternally, Napova's star has two main differences. Number one, that Yeonjun doesn't trust the cat and escapes, and number two, that Hyunin Kai is an angel and not a devil. These differences heavily rely on the idea that in that timeline, both of them chose the angel side and actually made the right call, which in Yeonjun's case means to run away and don't trust the cat, and in Hyunin Kai's case means to stay put. If you remember, the message on the window says that one of them shouldn't go up the stairs. And even if Yeonjun climbed stairs too, Hyunin Kai's stairs are far more relevant here, because according to what we saw in Runaway, that is the stairway that leads to the end of the game. As he climbs the stairs, however, we see that while the others are reunited, he went the wrong way. And even if he tries to reach them, his turn ends before he gets the chance to reach his friends. Now, if we go back and take a look at Runaway, this is actually a bit strange because that video shows us that Kai is level hard and crosses the maze without problem. It's like he has some cheat code or something, and this actually makes sense because he has wings, which means that in the context of the game he has the advantage because he can move in every direction while the others cannot. If Subin is like the will of the situation, who is level crazy and actually breaks every single rule of physics in order to cross over, Hyunin Kai is like the 11 of the story. So maybe the right choice for him is actually to wait for the others to catch up in order to finish the game together. I'm saying this because the only way for them to succeed, that is, for them to actually bring a better tomorrow instead of the apocalypse, is for them to be together again. But for this to happen, Kai has to wait for the others and not run away like we saw in Subin's dream. If Kai should stay and Yeonjun should go, however, Bamgyu should definitely chill because his section is really wild. Now, his nightmare begins with a reference to Maze in the Mirror, which is the song that he wrote and that may actually give us a glimpse of the amount of times that the game actually reset. But no matter how many times this nightmare repeats, the memory of the future that Bamgyu should worry about is the one related to Room 17. Now, in the vision, we see him in a study having an argument with somebody, and even if we don't actually see the other person, the location and the outfit of the stranger makes me think that Bamgyu here might be having a fight with his father. The reason behind this fight seems to be the magic book that we also saw in Subin's nightmare. And judging by the way Bamgyu is protecting the book, the point seems to be that the other person wants to take it and Bamgyu is refusing to obey. Now, if this is actually his father and this is actually what's happening, this could mean that in the future, Bamgyu's father will discover about the magic and actually try to stop his son from practicing it. But whether this will be the case or not, what happens next is actually what counts, because after the other person hits Bamgyu, Bamgyu loses control, transforms into the monster and, judging by the amount of blood on the walls, actually kills him. Now, if this wasn't enough, what makes this scene even worse is that when Monster Bamgyu looks at the camera, he shows no sign of remorse whatsoever about what he has done, which means that in the future he might actually lose control to the point of no return. Now, if you look closely, the scene of the transformation heavily recalls the scene in Can't You See Me where Bamgyu tries to suffocate Taehyun after he hits him with a pillow. And even if in that case he probably didn't kill him, the fact that the room gets engulfed into the red light suggests that in the future or in another timeline, Bamgyu is meant to lose control and actually hurt somebody. You see, in contrast to what happens to Yeonjun, who is too trustworthy for his own good, Bamgyu's narration actually suggests that his problem is the exact opposite, because his tagline says that he doesn't know which one to trust. Now, this sentence here is intentionally ambiguous because if on the one hand it could be referring to him not knowing who to trust among his friends, on the other it could be talking about the angel or devil side that are trying to take over inside of himself. But whether it's one or the other, his problems with trust will eventually lead him to use his power in a way that he shouldn't. Last but not least, we finally get to Taehyun's section, where we literally see the symbol of their dream turning into a nightmare. In his scene, Taehyun finds himself on a version of Magic Island that is bleeding out paint and that reveals the body of Yeonjun with a crown of flowers on his head. And this is a very eerie image because it implies that even if Yeonjun manages to transform his horns into a crown, that is, to follow his angel side rather than the devil one, that might still not be enough for him not to die. Now, in contrast to the other sections, Taehyun's scene is quite passive because his memory of the future actually revolves around somebody else. But considering that his power is the sight, this actually makes sense because his ability is to see things that others aren't able to see. In the context of the game, this power would actually make Taehyun the perfect candidate to be the Dungeon Master, because in Dungeons & Dragons, the DM doesn't actively participate but has complete knowledge of the other's whereabouts. But both the title of the section and the narration that follows implies that this could be the very problem that he needs to overcome. You see, if on the one hand the tagline says that witnessing Yeonjun's death pushes him to find a way, on the other the title of the section is Moratorium of Rest, which literally means a temporary prohibition to rest. In both cases here, the focus is on action rather than observation, and even if in Runaway and the concept photos Taehyun seems to actively trying to fix the problem, so far he has failed. And this is because after everything that we've seen, the earthquake ends and the boys end up forgetting everything that they saw. Now, even if Can't You See Me implied that both Subin and Taehyun are the liars, so far Subin takes the cake here. Not only because he caused all this mess to begin with, but also because, as Magic Island tells us, he actually remembers the dream but refuses to talk about it with anybody but Kai. This could possibly be the reason why the loop keeps on repeating, but as section 7 tells us, this is just the beginning, so we'll have to wait and see. In the meantime, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, please think about liking and subscribing. As always, thank you so much for watching guys, I'll see you next time, bye bye!